So as many of you probably know, I have a plan of like certain books that I read every single month, and one book that I try to read every single month is not making sense. It's great. Okay. Hi everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my priority nonfiction TBR. So many of you probably know this, but every month I try to read specific books. It's one of my goals from last year as well as this year. And one of those books is to read one nonfiction every single month because I keep collecting nonfiction books. So I thought what a good idea would be just kind of to show you some of the books that are kind of priorities for me, the types of nonfiction books that I read, because it's basically 3 categories of things that I read. So this video is going to be broken up into 3 different categories. The memoirs I'm really excited about, the historical books that I'm really excited about, and the true crime that I'm really excited about. So I have 10 books to show you today, and this will kind of be a way for me when I'm trying to figure out what I want to read every single month to come back to this video and see the list of books like I'm very excited about that are like top of my mind, and hopefully it'll help me pick books when it comes to my monthly TBRs, because I have a really bad habit of like forgetting half of the books that I own, and so maybe having a video like this and a list like this will be helpful for me. So I thought I would share with you some of the things that I'm really excited about. So the first section is going to be my memoirs of sorts, and I'm looking at this list and a lot of these are like newer books because I think I've gotten through a lot of the books that I like have had for a while. So the first one is my most recent nonfiction edition, and that is Warrior, and this is by Lisa Guerrero. This is a female reporter who was a sideline reporter for sports, and I'm trying to remember exactly, Monday Night Football. She's a sideline reporter for Monday Night Football, and then has moved over to Inside Edition and does more investigative journalism. But this talks about her story and just some of the hardships of being a woman in that industry and just some really tough situations that she gets herself into. But Chris got me this one last month, so it's right at like the top of my mind, so I definitely want to make time for this. I feel like it's going to be a really fun story. Fun's not the right word. It's going to be a very interesting story about her and how she has become the person that she's going to be. It really talks about being brave and how the world has kind of forced her to do that. So usually sports is not my thing, but this one is one that I'm actually quite interested in. And then the other two kind of go together a little bit because I got them both for Christmas, also from Chris. He asked me a lot of memoirs, and the first one is the memoir by Tom Felton, Beyond the Wand, the magic and mayhem of growing up a wizard. And this is just Tom Felton's memoir talking about his time in the Harry Potter movies. So I do love Tom Felton. He's become an actor that is really interesting to me, and seeing just as he's grown up, he's done a lot of stuff with the Wizarding World of Harry Potter and that kind of stuff. And like I'm looking through and there's all these pictures of them on set when they were younger, and I just think that sounds real fun. I'm interested to see like his side of things because I feel like I know a lot of the main character sides from that movie series, but not his. So love that he did a memoir, so I'm excited about that one. And then the last one in this little kind of like memoir category is Madly Deeply, and this is the Diaries of Alan Rickman, a foreword by Emma Thompson. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically his diaries where he's written down specific things on specific days, and we just kind of get a look in his life. I know there are parts of this where he talks about his time on Harry Potter and his reaction to some of the actors that he worked with, but this really dives into his career, and he's an actor that he's one of the, like the first actors that I like really latched on to as an actor, like to someone like I recognize that I enjoyed watching. So I'm really interested to see kind of his take on his career and that kind of stuff. And I'm not really sure what this book is going to turn into, but I am very interested to see kind of a look in his life. So that one is one that I'm excited about as well. Moving on to kind of the historical ones, if you will. The first one is The Women of the Cousins' War, The Duchess, the Queen, and the King's Mother by Philippa Gregory, David Baldwin, and Michael Jones. Philippa Gregory is an author that I talk a lot about on this channel. I have, it's up there, so maybe you can't see it, but I have a lot of her books. She's a historical fiction writer primarily. The one that I have is her Plantagenet and Tudor England series, but she is a historian, so this is a nonfiction book going into basically those four people. We have four different women during the Cousins' War, which was, I think, the war that took place in England before the Tudors. I think it's in that time period. So I don't know a lot about this, but I have loved her other works, all fiction, but I have loved the detail that she puts into those, so I'm very interested to see a nonfiction book written by her. I honestly didn't even think to look into a nonfiction book until I stumbled across this one. So I'm very interested about this time period. It says here, the extraordinary true stories of three women who until now have been largely forgotten by history. So we've got I'm gonna mess these up completely. Jacquetta of Luxembourg, Elizabeth Woodville, and Margaret Beaufort. So two of those three names are names that actually I know because of Philippa Gregory's other works. So I am very interested to see this section, again, time period in history that I'm very interested in, and I think that'll be decent because her writing is quite good and reads like real history. So I'm interested to see what she does with like an actual historical world. Another one is Eleanor of Aquitaine, and this is by Alison Weir. I am very interested to see Alison Weir as a nonfiction writer. I do have a book by her. She writes a lot of historical, kind of like Philippa Gregory. She writes a lot of historical fiction as well, but she is a historian. And I have a couple, actually 3 books by her. This one, a book about Henry VIII, and then a book about Elizabeth I. But this is one out of those 3. I feel like I know a lot about Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, just because that's a time period in history, the Tudor time period, that I know really well. And I have never heard of this person before, but this takes place in the Middle Ages. And she is one of the great heroines. And it's at a time where women were regarded as little more than chattel. She basically decided to stand up for herself and made some historical changes. So I don't know who this is, but I really want to give, like I said, Alison Weir a chance as far as a nonfiction writer, because I feel like her stuff is like her fiction stuff, where it's really easily readable. So I'm interested to see how it's going to go, and this is just one that I don't know anything about, so I'm interested to learn about a time period that I know nothing about. And then the last one is more, I don't even know how to explain this. It feels more comical than anything else, but it is historical. And it's To Marry an English Lord, Tales of Wealth and Marriage, Sex and Snobbery by Gail McColl and Carol Wallace. This is basically just a bunch of, like, a collection of stories that take place in England. So it takes place kind of in 1895, in that time where a bunch of wealthy American heiresses came over to England to basically they wanted titles. They came over and swapped money and dowries and wealth for a title. And this is like stories that took place at that time. It feels very like a bunch of small stories. And it is based on, obviously, a bunch of families at this time that were really wealthy. We had the Vanderbilts, who were the railroads. We had the pharmaceutical family. We had an oil family. We had a New York trolley family, things like that. So I'm not really sure what I'm getting into. It feels like a collection of stories, but it's written and like presented in a like almost newspaper style. So I'm very interested what this one's about. But I honestly forgot I had it. It was hiding downstairs. So I'm excited to see what we're getting into with this one. Actually, I lied. There's one more that kind of fits in the historical section, and that is The Marriage Bureau. And this is by Penrose Howson, and it's the true stories of how 2 matchmakers arranged love in wartime London. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It takes place in 1939. It's during the Second World War. It follows this matchmaking agency, basically, and this is just a collection of stories of a bunch of different matches that were made. And the woman who wrote this is the proprietor of said bureau. And so she has created a story about it. And it just sounds like a lot of fun. Again, more of a collection of stories kinds of things, but they are more specific to a very, like, one location. And that just sounds like fun. I don't know, there's just something about this that really calls to me. And I'm interested to see all of the, like, matches that came out of this real life thing. And it's at a time period that's like really not the happiest. Like, wartime is not a happy time period, especially World Wars I and II, which are time periods that I kind of steer clear of when it comes to reading certain things. So the fact that this is like a happy story of sorts, happy stories that take place during this time, I think is very interesting. So I want to read that one as well. Now we're getting into the the true crime section, which is only 3. All of these are historical true crime, because that's what I gravitate towards. The first one being Death at the Priory by James Rudick. It says sex, love, and murder in Victorian England. So this follows a couple, and they live at this place called the Priory, which is this very wealthy, like, estate. We follow Florence Ricardo, who is a widow, and she remarries to this attorney named Charles Bravo, and they move into the Priory. And it says, like, their marriage seemed to be perfect, but of course it's not. It sounds like he was a very abusive husband and then ends up dead. So it sounds like, you know, did she do it? We don't really know. It's going to dive into their history and kind of what happened at this time period. So that sounds like my thing. We also have a 1950s murder mystery, The Curious Habits of Dr. Adams by Jane Robbins. This is exactly what it sounds like. It takes place in the 50s, but it says here July 1957 is really where it started. And there were some suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of a glamorous widow named Bobby Hullett. And as they dived into that, they discovered that this doctor has been doing some sketchy stuff in this town. It says post-war England. So it's going to be a study of this doctor and all of the suspicious things, because I feel like a lot of his patients something may have happened, suspicious things surrounding all of them. So I'm interested to see how it's going to work. And I don't know, something about this just sounds fascinating. So I'm interested to see that one. I don't know, I just think this is going to be very, very interesting. And then the last book on this list is Mrs. Sherlock Holmes by Brad Ricca, and it says the true story of New York City's greatest female detective and the 1917 missing girl case that captivated a nation. So this follows the true story of Grace Humilston, who's lawyer detective and the first woman U.S. district attorney in New York. And it sounds like she's really gets taken by this case of a missing girl and becomes kind of obsessed with that story and finding a solution to it. So is there a solution? I don't know if we know, but this is a story of that person, and I'm very interested to see this true story of someone who could have been the very first Sherlock Holmes, real life Sherlock Holmes. I don't know, there's just something about like following the detective as they go down the rabbit hole trying to figure stuff out that's fascinating to me, and the fact that this is nonfiction just kind of makes that just a little bit better, you know? I don't know, true crime has like always been a thing, but I'm really now diving into books about true crime. And that's it. That is a look at some of my priority top TBR books. Let me know if you are a nonfiction reader or if there are different specific genres like true crime and history and things like that that is fascinating to you. Let me know some of your favorites. If you like some of the, you know, memoirs, true crime, historical books like I do, let me know some of your recommendations down below. I can always use more, so please let me know all of your thoughts. But if you liked this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links. So don't forget to check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!